A couple more reports about Jimmy Garoppolo, the San Francisco 49ers. Players might prefer Jimmy, but he's out the door, Croc. That, and we're breaking down linebackers, previewing maybe the easiest position to project into 2022 on the 49ers roster. Coming up right now.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. This episode brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. I do want to thank everybody for joining us here and making us your first listen every day on Locked On 49ers. Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day is what we do, Croc. And a big happy training camp week. Players showing up, reporting. Camp is going to start now. The off-season over. Croc, it is now the on-season. Congratulations. We made it.
We made it barely, right? And I guess the topics heading into it are some of the things that's been going on this entire offseason and definitely surrounding the quarterback position. So we made it to training camp, but
yeah. The two main stories are still a cloud hanging over the 49ers beginning of camp because Jimmy G's still on the roster, but he's not going to be on the roster. And Deebo Samuel is going to be on the roster, but he hasn't signed an extension yet. So is he going to show up? It sounds like he is going to show up to training camp. He showed up to mini camp, which makes you think he is going to show up to training camp. But as far as news goes, we're going to get some more news this week with players actually showing up, who's healthy, who's not, who's on the practice field. And we'll start to get some clarity with those things when there are reporters and players and coaches and front office people talking to those reporters in Santa Clara. So that is going to be a lot of fun. But the latest as it pertains to Jimmy G and the 49ers, before we get to the linebackers here approaching training camp, is something you brought to my attention that I didn't see. It was sort of kind of got in before the weekend, late Friday, and I think a lot of people aren't really talking about it, was the report from Dianna Russini on I think it was on ESPN, right?
ESPN Get Up.
Yeah, okay. Show. Oh, so it was Friday morning, I guess, then.
Well, actually, by the time I heard it, which was Friday morning, it had already been out for almost a full day. So
yeah, it's interesting. Nobody
just didn't circulate around.
So here's the thing: this is the report that people don't want. Like, the national media doesn't like this report. They like the Jimmy Garoppolo's in camp quarterback competition. That's what they want. But the Dianna Russini report was her source with the 49ers that she talked to was basically like, "Will you stop asking me this question? I don't know how else to tell you. Jimmy is gone. We've got Trey Lance. He is our new quarterback."
They're moving on. And I feel like they've made it clear throughout this entire offseason, starting with not even the owners meeting, I think going back before that to the combine. All right, so starting with the combine, you definitely had John Lynch out there saying, hey, we had deals in place to trade away Jimmy Garoppolo, and they fell through because he announced he had to get a shoulder surgery. We were a little blindsided by that decision, and, we'll figure it out from here on. But right there, that was, hey, we're trying to get rid of Jimmy. And then you hear Kyle Shanahan at the owners meeting, and he kind of rebuttals that. Like, hey, yeah, we're happy with where Trey Lance is. That's why we're willing to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. We're trying to trade him. The shoulder surgery slowed things down. He repeated everything pretty much that John Lynch said. And still, for some reason, every question every day in the media, on every show, whether it was Fox Sports, whether it was ESPN, NFL Network, it always surrounded, hey, 49ers, they're trying to keep Jimmy Garoppolo. Why is he still there? Why is Jimmy still on the roster? Like maybe they're keeping him as insurance. And this person, I guess, whoever this source is, had enough of all that and said, listen, I don't know what the hell any of y'all are talking about. We don't know how to make it any more clear than we already have. We are moving on from Jimmy Garoppolo and going forward with Trey Lance, which that has been the plan all along. So it shouldn't be any crazy thought. That's the plan. When you traded up to get Trey Lance and used 3 first-round picks on this quarterback, this was going to happen. So it shouldn't be a shock. And there are a lot of people celebrating it. I'm not one that's celebrating, oh, yeah, they're kicking Jimmy Garoppolo out of it. No, Jimmy was a solid quarterback for the 49ers and won a lot of games. But we knew this was coming because this was part of the process, and it's happening.
Even before that, Croc, all the way back to Jimmy Garoppolo's last press conference with reporters, his last time in Santa Clara, he's basically like, all right, guys, it was cool. It was a good time. We had fun. We won some games, and I'll see you later. And that was it. And he hasn't been back since. Like, he's been gone. I know he's on the roster still, so I can see why you might look and say, well, he's still not traded yet. Why haven't the 49ers traded him? But he'll be cleared. He'll be either traded or released at some point soon. So the 49ers are giving themselves a couple weeks here, I think, with the official mid-August thing. So that buys them a couple weeks. So he's not cleared. So he doesn't get fined if he doesn't show up to camp. Jimmy was never going to show up to camp. This gives them a little bit more time into camp to figure this thing out, either release him. And the whole thing about his agent, and she also said this, we've been talking about it. Don Yee, Jimmy G's agent, had to be involved when in any trade with Jimmy Garoppolo all offseason long anyway. So the fact that he's been allowed, his agent's been allowed to seek a trade, that's his agent was involved this whole time. So yeah. The other report this weekend from Sean Salisbury on, I think it was Houston Talk Radio, and he's done some Bay Area Talk Radio recently, and he said his sources say that players prefer Jimmy Garoppolo. And we've heard some things like that throughout the offseason. And of course, the 49ers love Jimmy Garoppolo. And that's why they haven't tried to just give him away or just cut him already at this point. But they think he has value. So they want to try to get something for him. And they don't want to, give up the injury guarantee if they don't have to. But, of course, players love Jimmy G. They've won a lot of games with him. They have a lot of respect for Jimmy Garoppolo. But what was weird about the Salisbury report on the radio is he didn't say that players told him they like Jimmy Garoppolo. It was sources told him that the players like Jimmy Garoppolo. So it just seems like the same report that keeps coming out of somewhere around the 49ers, whether it was an ex-player, ex-coach, current players, current people in the organization. I don't know where some of the leaks are coming from. But everything negative it feels like it's the same old person from the same old place that's just talking to everybody. That's the vibe I get with everything that's like sort of a negative. It's sort of more of a slight to Trey Lance than it's even a positive about Jimmy Garoppolo, is that Trey Lance can't win over the locker room or something.
Right. And I mean, that's something tough, especially when you've done what Jimmy Garoppolo has done with his team. I mean, in the 2 years that he was healthy, and you wish that it was more than that, right? And I think that's part of the reason why we're in this conversation right now. But 2 NFC championship games and a Super Bowl. So I could see how players who were a part of that, or maybe even a part of a year or two before that, where it was, or a year before that, where it was ugly, right? And part of some of those ugly teams, where it's like, man, we know when we have him, like, we win. And he's a great leader, and we like him, and everybody, rallies around him. Like, dude, I would prefer that over the unknown, or a guy that might, take his lumps or growing pains. And I think that's understandably so. I think anyone who's been in any type of team element or business or whatever, why would you not go with the unknown? I mean, with the known, right? Where you had a lot of success with this. So I can definitely see players who are still behind Jimmy Garoppolo. And those are things that, Trey Lance goes out there and he performs well, it'll go away. I also know that if I'm, let's say Deebo Samuel, and I'm not saying this is Deebo with his reports, but if I was Deebo Samuel, I just had an 1,800-yard season. Why would I want a different quarterback coming in to throw off that dynamic of what I just did? Potentially costing me money when I'm trying to earn a new contract if he doesn't get it, But that's how I would be thinking about it. I don't care that you invested a lot in this young quarterback. I don't care that he has this high upside. I don't know where he's at right now, but I do know that this other guy has helped me really support my family and change lives in my family for what I can do financially now. So, yeah, I mean, if I was a player in that locker room, I get it. I'd rather go with the known. But if you are on the coaching staff, if you are even a fan that has a kind of an outside perspective of it, you understand that, with your fandom, has Jimmy kind of done as much as he can do with the 49ers? And I think he's there. I think that's why Kyle Shanahan and, they drafted a quarterback, but they checked into some other things. They looked at, okay, Matthew Stafford, can we get it? Oh, man, Rams beat us to the punch. Okay, Deshaun Watson, oh, dang, he's a weirdo. Okay, Aaron Rodgers on draft day, can we trade the number 3 overall pick? So clearly they were trying to figure out, how do we get better from Jimmy Garoppolo? Because I think he's taking us, or we've taken him as far as we can go. Everything has to be so perfect to win in the biggest moment. And you hope that Trey Lance can get you there, but most people, I'd assume, knows that's not something that's going to happen day one.
Yeah, and you can like Jimmy and also want to raise the ceiling at that position at the same time, which is
you don't know if you're going to raise the ceiling, right? But
you're
with
trying to.
anything, right? Any gamble, any business venture, right? I mean, things I got going on with this gym. This gym is expensive, right? And I could have played it safe and stayed where I was. And it's like, nah, like, let's go bigger. And man, I got this. And you have to go out there, and there has to be this growth process in it. And a lot of things I'm going to learn along the way, things where it's like, man, why did I do that? But you have to go through that. And I think whatever the 49ers go through with Trey Lance, you got to go through it. But hopefully, we're talking about, in a few years, this is a quarterback who 49ers are favorites because their quarterback is so good, even if they don't want to win something right away.
Yeah, I like that. Croc's new gym is kind of like the Trey Lance. You raise the ceiling, right? But you take a chance too, because you had a gym, you could work out, all your athletes at the same gym you're at before, but you get your own gym, you raise your ceiling, and but you do take on some risks. So that's a fantastic way to look at it. And it also underscores the whole, like, it's time to end the distraction of Jimmy and Trey and get Jimmy off the roster so Trey can focus and be the guy, and every other player on the roster isn't asked those questions again for another year. They just can't go through that again. So and they're going to get those questions at least for one more press conference at the beginning of training camp, unless Jimmy Garoppolo is traded in the next 2 days, basically. How about linebackers? How about them linebackers? Fred Warner, best linebacker in the NFL, headlining a really good group, but it's the back end that are fighting for maybe the last spot on the roster. Is there even any spots on the roster available? Let's go through the 49ers linebacker position and project out what we think that roster might look out and who we're watching in training camp next. But I want to tell you about our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Tons of fun lines at BetOnline, all ready for the 2022 season. You can bet on the 49ers to win the Super Bowl. You can bet on Kyle Shanahan for Coach of the Year. You can bet on the over-under of 12 sacks for Nick Bosa, for example. Tons of other props as well at BetOnline. You can even bet on the odds for Jimmy Garoppolo's new team, which is a fun one at BetOnline. They've got the odds for that one. And according to BetOnline, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pulling it up right now because I think it is interesting because they have money in the game, and they believe that the best odds for Jimmy Garoppolo's next landing spot is still the Cleveland Browns, even though that has been squashed recently. But it's a sneaky one in there. New York Giants and Seahawks are next at plus 350. Texans, Lions, Bears, Jets, Saints, a few other teams there that are still in the mix, according to BetOnline odds for the services of Jimmy Garoppolo. So you can bet on that. Major League Baseball, NBA, combat sports, esports, live betting, and more. Get over to the website or use your mobile device today to learn more about the trends in action at BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks again, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen. Make sure you're checking out for your second listen the Peacock and Williamson NFL show right here on the Locked On Podcast Network and Locked On NFL Draft, co-hosted by my co-host here, Eric Crocker, coming at you daily. Fred Warner, lock it in. Best linebacker in the NFL. He's got the green dot. He is the starting linebacker. He's the every down linebacker. And I don't think there's a lot that needs to be said about Fred Warner, except for he's probably, is he the most reliable player now that Laken Tomlinson's gone? Laken Tomlinson played every snap for the 49ers. And I feel like now that he's gone, that Fred Warner's the new like Iron Man on the 49ers roster.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one guy where going into the game, no matter how beat up he is, you feel like he's going to be out there. There was a play in the Dallas Cowboy game where I'm like, oh my goodness, he tore his ACL. He's done. Like, oh my goodness, 49ers, they're in trouble on the defensive side of the ball. And next thing you know, he's right back out there playing against Green Bay in the cold. So he's tough, that's for sure.
Luckily for the 49ers, and God forbid, knock on wood here, if Fred Warner did miss some time this year, they have a couple of other really nice linebackers, and most teams don't have more than 2 linebackers on the field very often. So, Croc, I'll ask you this: when Fred Warner is when Fred Warner is on the field, which is almost every single down of the NFL season, who's going to be that guy next to him? Is it Azeez al-Shaair, who we saw a lot of, who played at a really high level, or is it Dre Greenlaw, who Azeez al-Shaair sort of took over his role when Greenlaw had been injured recently.
I think that might be an underrated camp battle, right? I mean, looking at it, I think most people would kind of lean towards Azeez al-Shaair, but prior to last season, everybody would lean towards Dre Greenlaw. So I think that's a good problem to have, that you have confidence in either one of these guys being able to fill in. Who will be the full-time guy? I lean towards Azeez, but I think Dre Greenlaw, with an offseason of understanding what's at stake, probably kind of turn it up a notch. I think it's going to be a terrific camp battle.
I think a healthy Dre Greenlaw probably wins the job. I just think they like Greenlaw and his ability as the weak side backer, with Azeez al-Shaair working in behind Fred Warner and then being in there on the strong side when they go to a 3 linebacker look. I think that's probably the way they'll do things. But yeah, that could go either way. That is a fun camp battle because they're both really good players. And I think in a lot of ways, Dre Greenlaw, because of how quickly he started games as a rookie for the 49ers, and Azeez al-Shaair was an undrafted free agent the same year. I think for that reason, people look at Dre Greenlaw as the better player, but I'm not sure I agree. I do think I've liked what I've seen so far from Azeez al-Shaair, even more than Dre Greenlaw, even though Greenlaw's a little bit more athletic and, projects as a better coverage player. But I think Greenlaw is more of an up and down player and less consistent, and he'll make some big plays, but then he'll also miss on some plays, whereas Azeez al-Shaair is just kind of rock solid and unspectacular in some ways, which might work against him in as far as how recognizable he is on the field.
I had someone message me after, I believe it was the Colts game, and he said, bro, who the hell is number 51? I thought Fred Warner was the all-pro. This guy's playing like an all-pro. And that's kind of the respect that Azeez is getting from outsiders. So he definitely is a guy that flies around. One of my favorite plays is seeing him smash somebody. I believe it was in the Rams game. He gets up, his helmet, the bars are all crooked. I'm like, is this guy, did he just crush his own face mask? So he's arriving with bad intentions as well. He's an impressive guy. And I like that when everyone talks about player development and they mention guys, but why aren't people talking about Azeez? No, again, you mentioned the guy being an undrafted rookie free agent, and now he's being looked at as one of the better linebackers on the team, right next to Fred Warner.
It's a nice trio to have. The 49ers are in really good shape, top-heavy position group, deep position group, to have 3 starting quality linebackers that you can feel good about in base, and then you can have some athleticism in sub packages and have some depth in case somebody gets banged up here and there. And then they have depth beyond those 3 players as well. So, and by the way, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles was also an undrafted free agent in 2019. Hell of an undrafted free agent haul there to find a guy that's a starting caliber linebacker and a solid backup linebacker in Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. So a really good group. And it also goes to show you that some of these other guys that are undrafted free agents, you can't sleep on these guys because you can go win a job in the NFL.
Yeah, I think he's another one of those guys that was a safety, I believe, in college, or had some safety experience there and kind of transitioned to a linebacker for the 49ers. He's not listed as the biggest of guys. So he's right at 6'2", 223, which is solid for a big safety, but definitely on the thinner side as a corner, as a linebacker. So a guy I've been following since he was at Arizona, and we kind of follow each other, message each other before he even went to the 49ers. So it's been pretty cool to kind of see him stick around and truly have to fight through a lot of the roster politics of an undrafted guy trying to make a roster, let alone 2 guys with Azeez.
Yeah, I think in college he played at only 205 pounds or something as a safety. He played some free safety even as well. Ran 4.58 coming out of school. I always thought he was like 6'4" just because he's so lanky for a linebacker. But I believe he's only 6'2", and he's pretty light. So he can play some special teams, but I think he's the most common name in this whole linebacker group that might have to worry a little bit about who's behind him, because there's one name who's as much of a lock at this point as Azeez al-Shaair and Dre Greenlaw are to be on the linebacker roster behind Fred Warner. We'll get to that player next, and some of the undrafted free agents, some other guys battling for roster spots at linebacker for the 49ers in 2022. But I've got to let the folks out there know about Dave. Hindsight is 2020. You can't change the past, but you could get a little help from your future self. Maybe you'd ask to borrow a little cash. Well, now you can with Dave. Dave is the banking app that can help you get $500. Excuse me, that is $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, catch up on bills, whatever it is you need to do. Finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That is D-A-V-E, Dave. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. Oren Burks was a priority signing for the 49ers this offseason. They made a major push, bringing in George Odom, bringing in Oren Burks to solidify special teams. It was something that they clearly prioritized this offseason. And aside from Charvarius Ward, the most obvious thing they did this offseason was add special teams players. And Oren Burks is one of those guys. He's a special team star from the Green Bay Packers, another former safety, really athletic linebacker that might not see the field all that much with how good Azeez al-Shaair and Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner are, but he is a lock to make the team just because of his special teams ability on its own, and he can give you some depth as a weak side linebacker as well. And last week when we had our good buddy now, Tabor Pepper, another special teamer on the program, he was going off about Oren Burks and how every rep he sees on tape is just teaching tape from Oren Burks. And man, it gets you excited about how much better the 49ers special teams unit could be this year.
Yeah, sometimes you hear guys give compliments and maybe they're saying something that's a little bit more politically correct, or they just were, hey, how do you like this guy? And then you give this kind of cheesy response. Oh, man, he works hard. He goes in there. But the Oren Burks love there, we didn't ask about him. He just fired that off the cusp and just went really kind of on a semi-rant of just how much he loves him and how much he pays attention to detail. And you only have to show him something once, and he picks up on it. Now, most of what he was talking about was special teams, and that's how he interacts with them. But I wouldn't be surprised if he carries some of that over to the defensive side of the ball. And if you're looking at a 49ers coaching staff, who I give a lot of love to those guys. I think they coach guys up and they get them prepared, even if they're not the best of players. So if you have a guy like Burks who pays attention to detail as much as he does, I feel like that's somebody that DeMeco Ryan is going to be like, wait, hold on. Let me really take this guy under my wing, and maybe I can put him in position to where he is more than just a special teamer for us.
And that's where it starts to get difficult to make this roster because there's so many locks. There's 4 straight up locks at linebacker. And then you have Demetrius Flanagan-Foles, who's been around for a while and clearly the team likes. And if those are the 5, then those are the 5. Because last year the 49ers took 5 linebackers from camp to make the 53-man roster. And one of those was converted safety Marcel Harris, who's no longer on the team. So the 49ers' other 4 linebackers was Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Azeez al-Shaair, and Demetrius Flanagan-Foles. And now they've added Oren Burks, who is a lock as a special teamer and backup linebacker. So if the 49ers keep 5 again, unless there's injury, it's going to be tough for one of these other dudes. And the 49ers, do you remember right before the 53-man rosters were announced, the Niners traded one of their undrafted linebackers, Jonas Griffith, to the Denver Broncos. And so they had really good undrafted free agent linebacker again, but there was just not enough room for that player to make it. And then there was the other guy from Ohio State that I believe got claimed somewhere as well, and I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Hillard?
Gosh, dang it. No, I don't remember. But I think he did stick, at least on somebody's practice.
Like it was Hillard.
Hilliard. That's what it was.
There we go.
Hilliard.
Yeah, something like that. I knew it was something
Nailed
like
it.
that.
And there's another group. There was an undrafted free agent from last year, Curtis Robinson from Stanford. And then there's another group of 3 more undrafted free agents this year. Segun Olubi from San Diego State. There is Marcelino McCrary Ball and Jeremiah Gemmel. Now, I can't tell you the scouting report on McCrary Ball or Gemmel, but I did watch some of Segun Alubi, and he's another guy that's built a lot like Demetrius Flanagan-Foles, the safety, the former safety body type, 215 pounds, a really athletic player. When I watched some San Diego State film of him, and again, he's like right in that zone, 262, 215, 220, something like that. He's listed at 220 on the 49ers roster, but I think he was more like 215 in college. And he's athletic, but I wanted to see just a tick more of like, wow, okay, this guy's only 215 pounds, but look at him fly around the field. And he was good, but I don't know if he was good enough to where I was like, oh, this guy's going to roll into camp and take one of those guys' jobs. It's going to be very difficult, but I think one of these guys is going to stick. And who knows, maybe even if they try to put him on waivers, someone else comes calling for Segun Alubi, or they maybe even make a trade at the end of training camp if everyone stays healthy. But Alubi is the one that stood out the most of that group. And I think there's an opportunity again for one of those undrafted free agents to stick around for a little while. So it's going to be a fun group there after the Azeez al-Shaair versus Dre Greenlaw matchup. And that might be figured out very quickly just based on how they're taking reps early in camp. But yeah, those undrafted free agents from the last 2 years fighting it out with Demetrius Flanagan-Foles for the last spot, or who has the right to stick on the practice squad.
Do you think the 49ers end up missing Marcel Harris? Because he was a guy that could play safety. Obviously, last year he played some linebacker, got an interception in the game while playing linebacker against the Houston Texans, when the 49ers actually kind of needed it too. That was kind of a big play in that game, filling in for a player. So I just thought he was so versatile, a guy that definitely consistently made plays, impact plays, forced fumbles, interception, whatever it was that you needed. He was able to do it. Tackles for losses. He was around the box. Maybe not a safety guy, but when you look at the depth, could he be someone that the 49ers kind of miss a little bit?
I don't know. I think you were higher on Marcel Harris than I was.
I think I was higher than him than pretty much everybody else, including the 49ers.
Even at safety before they moved him to linebacker. And I kind of liked the move to linebacker. And when I saw, that was part of the reason why I thought Hufanga was potentially going to be going to linebacker too. I thought they were just going to go with this dime linebacker position with guys like Marcel Harris and Hufanga that were sort of tweenerish players, and Drake Greenlaw almost fits that mold. But they moved on from Marcel Harris. I just think when they added Oren Burks, I just don't think there was enough room to add another guy, because I think they like Flanagan-Foles, and obviously they've got 4 strong ahead of Foles as well on the roster. So I just think it was more like they didn't have enough space and they liked their depth and they thought they could get away with it. And I think they were right. I don't think they needed him. And I think linebacker is one of those positions, as we've seen multiple times now with the 49ers, a guy that's a late round pick or undrafted can come in and ball out. I mean, 3rd rounder, 5th rounder, and a whole bunch of undrafted free agents. And they're all players right now on the 49ers roster.
How many coaching staffs? And again, I know we know more about what's going on with the 49ers than most of these other teams. We know every single move that they do, every single roster cut, signing, free agent, undrafted guy and whatnot. But I feel like they coach extremely well and they just keep it coming. So how many coaching staffs would you put over this staff? You look at the 49ers, when they have competent quarterback play, they win games. So, and then you look at everyone else that just consistently does well. And then even when you are less than, I was on a radio show earlier today, or Sunday morning, and that was one thing I brought up. They asked about the offensive line. And I'm like, man, on paper, I'm worried. But then when you look at the 49ers track record, their coaching and how they've been able to overcome some of their shortcomings at some of these, regular positions, they've done very well.
They have. They've continually found steals in the late round. And I don't know if it's a combination of how well they've drafted and scouted. So do you give a hat tip to the scouting department for finding those players late, or do you give the hat tip to the coaching staff for developing them? Or, in reality, it's probably just a mixture of those things. And I think they've done both pretty well. And it's funny because a lot of people look at some of their earlier picks and say, man, Jimmy Garoppolo didn't get better after he was with the 49ers. Obviously he wasn't a 49ers draft pick. It was like, man, Garoppolo kind of was the same guy that showed up in 2017 and never got different, never was any better. Some of the earlier picks that the 49ers have missed on didn't get better. But then they've developed all these late round guys that have become stars, 5th rounders and 3rd rounders.
And then not stars, legit NFL players.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, because the average NFL career is 3.5 years.
Yeah.
So we're talking about guys who are playing even longer than that because they're getting second contracts elsewhere. Guys that were undrafted and kind of, I don't want to say made with the 49ers. 'Cause, I mean, you make yourself with your talent, but the guys that they're identifying as guys that can make the roster and play, they're going on to other places and continuing to have careers.
Even a guy like Demetrius Flanagan-Foles, I don't know if he'll ever make a lot of money in the NFL, but he's already beaten the 3.5 years, right?
Right.
So as an undrafted guy, so that's pretty cool. So definitely the 49ers are doing something right with their development with those mid to late round picks and undrafted free agents. And I think they do have a really good coaching staff. And you're right. When you have a solid quarterback on the field, the 49ers win a whole bunch of games. And you can't argue with that. So, yeah, pretty good results. How good is Trey Lance? That's what's going to have a lot to do with those wins and losses. And I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about Trey Lance in the coming weeks as we go through training camp, as he goes through training camp as QB1 for the San Francisco 49ers. Croc and I will be here for all of it. Thanks so much for making Locked On 49ers your first listen. Croc and I back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.